Chapter 3 of Totem and Taboo by Sigmund Freud. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 3: Animism, Magic, and the Omnipotence of Thought. Section 1. It is a necessary defect of studies which seek to apply the point of view of psychoanalysis to the mental sciences that they cannot do justice to either subject. They therefore confine themselves to the role of incentives and make suggestions to the expert which he should take into consideration in his work. This defect will make itself felt most strongly in an essay such as this, which tries to treat of the enormous sphere called Animism. Footnote: The necessary crowding of the material also compels us to dispense with a thorough bibliography. Instead of this, the reader is referred to the well-known works of Herbert Spencer, J.G. Frazer, A. Lang, E.B. Tylor, and W. Wundt, from which all the statements concerning animism and magic are taken. The independence of the author can manifest itself only in the choice of the material and of opinions. End footnote. Animism in the narrower sense is the theory of psychic concepts, and in the wider sense of spiritual beings in general. Animatism, the animation theory of seemingly inanimate nature, is a further subdivision which also includes animatism and animism. The name animism, formerly applied to a definite philosophic system, seems to have acquired its present meaning through E.B. Tylor. What led to the formulation of these names is the insight into the very remarkable conceptions of nature and the world of those primitive races known to us from history and from our own times. These races populate the world with a multitude of spiritual beings which are benevolent or malevolent to them, and attribute the causation of natural processes to these spirits and demons. They also consider that not only animals and plants, but inanimate things as well, are animated by them. A third and perhaps the most important part of this primitive nature philosophy seems far less striking to us because we ourselves are not yet far enough removed from it, though we have greatly limited the existence of spirits and today explain the processes of nature by the assumption of impersonal physical forces. For primitive people believe in a similar animation of human individuals as well. Human beings have souls which can leave their habitation and enter into other beings. These souls are the bearers of spiritual activities and are, to a certain extent, independent of the bodies. Originally, souls were thought of as beings very similar to individuals. Only in the course of a long evolution did they lose their material character and attain a higher degree of spiritualization. Most authors incline to the assumption that these soul conceptions are the original nucleus of the animistic system, that spirits merely correspond to souls that have become independent, and that the souls of animals, plants, and things were formed after the analogy of human souls. How did primitive people come to the peculiarly dualistic fundamental conceptions on which this animistic system rests? Through the observation, it is thought, of the phenomena of sleep with dreams and death which resemble sleep, and through the effort to explain these conditions which affect each individual so intimately. Above all, the problem of death must have become the starting point of the formation of the theory. To primitive man the continuation of life, immortality, would be self-evident. The conception of death is something accepted later, and only with hesitation, for even to us it is still devoid of content and unrealizable. Very likely discussions have taken place over the part which may have been played by other observations and experiences in the formation of the fundamental animistic conceptions such as dream imagery, shadows, and reflections, but these have led to no conclusions. If primitive man reacted to the phenomena that stimulated his reflection with the formation of conceptions of the soul, and then transferred these to objects of the outer world, his attitude will be judged to be quite natural and in no way mysterious. In view of the fact that animistic conceptions have been shown to be similar among the most varied races and in all periods, Wundt states that these are the necessary psychological product of the myth-forming consciousness, and primitive animism may be looked upon as the spiritual expression of man's natural state insofar as this is at all accessible to our observation." Hume has already justified the animation of the inanimate in his Natural History of Religions, where he said, "There is a universal tendency among mankind to conceive all beings like themselves, and to transfer to every object those qualities with which they are familiarly acquainted and of which they are intimately conscious." Animism is a system of thought. It gives not only the explanation of a single phenomenon, but makes it possible to comprehend the totality of the world from one point as a continuity. Writers maintain that in the course of time three such systems of thought, three great world systems, came into being: the animistic, mythological, the religious, and the scientific. Of these, Animism, the first system, is perhaps the most consistent and the most exhaustive, and the one which explains the nature of the world in its entirety. This first world system of mankind is now a psychological theory. It would go beyond our scope to show how much of it can still be demonstrated in the life of today, either as a worthless survival in the form of superstition, or in living form as the foundation of our language, our belief, and our philosophy. It is in reference to the successive stages of these three world systems that we say that Animism in itself was not yet a religion, but contained the prerequisites from which religions were later formed. It is also evident that myths are based upon animistic foundations, but the detailed relation of myths to Animism seem unexplained in some essential points. Section 2. Our psychoanalytic work will begin at a different point. It must not be assumed that mankind came to create its first world system through a purely speculative thirst for knowledge. The practical need of mastering the world must have contributed to this effort. We are therefore not astonished to learn that something else went hand in hand with the animistic system, namely the elaboration of directions for making oneself master of men, animals, and things, as well as of their spirits. S. Reinach wants to call these directions, which are known under the names of sorcery and magic, the strategy of animism. With Moss and Hubert, I should prefer to compare them to a technique. Can the conceptions of sorcery and magic be separated? It can be done if we are willing on our own authority to put ourselves above the vagaries of linguistic usage. Then sorcery is essentially the art of influencing spirits by treating them like people under the same circumstances, that is to say, by appeasing them, reconciling them, making them more favorably disposed to one, by intimidating them, by depriving them of their power, and by making them subject to one's will. All that is accomplished through the same methods that have been found effective with living people. Magic, however, is something else. It does not essentially concern itself with spirits, and uses special means, not the ordinary psychological method. We can easily guess that magic is the earlier and the more important part of animistic technique, for among the means with which spirits are to be treated there are also found the magic kind, and magic is also applied where spiritualization of nature has not yet, as it seems to us, been accomplished. Magic must serve the most varied purposes. It must subject the processes of nature to the will of man, protect the individual against enemies and dangers, and give him the power to injure his enemies. But the principles on whose assumptions the magic activity is based, or rather the principle of magic, is so evident that it was recognized by all authors. If we may take the opinion of E.B. Tylor at its face value, it can be most tersely expressed in his words, "mistaking an ideal connection for a real one." We shall explain this characteristic in the case of two groups of magic acts. One of the most widespread magic procedures for injuring an enemy consists of making an effigy of him out of any kind of material. The likeness counts for little; in fact, any object